My name is Jack Mahoney, and I own a garage in this sleepy New England coastal town where everyone knows everyone else's business. At least I thought they did. Turns out, I was the last guy to figure out that my wife Celine was playing house with her boss, while I was under the hood of someone's broken-down Chevy. The night everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I came home from the shop with grease under my fingernails and the smell of motor oil in my hair. Celine was sitting at our kitchen table, laptop open, pretending to work on some corporate presentation. She barely looked up when I walked in. "You're late," she said, not bothering to hide the irritation in her voice. "Mrs. Patterson's transmission gave up the ghost. Had to tow her car and drive her home." I grabbed a beer from the fridge and popped it open. "How was your day at the office, honey?" She finally glanced up, and I noticed something different. Her makeup was fresh, like she'd reapplied it recently. Her lipstick was a shade I'd never seen before, darker and more expensive looking than her usual stuff. "Fine. We had drinks after work to celebrate the quarterly numbers." She closed the laptop with more force than necessary. Victor treated the whole team. Victor Felder, her boss, the hotshot CEO of the fintech startup where Celine worked as HR manager. I'd met him exactly once, at last year's company Christmas party, where he'd made it clear that blue-collar guys like me weren't worth his time. The feeling was mutual. "That's nice of Victor," I said, taking a long pull from my beer. "Funny thing, though, I drove past the harbor master around 6, and I could have sworn I saw your car there." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Celine's fingers froze over her laptop keyboard for just a second. "We went to several places. You know how these things are." I knew how these things were, all right. What I didn't know was how long my wife had been lying to my face. Later that night, after Celine had gone to bed claiming she had an early meeting, I sat in my workshop in the basement, nursing another beer and thinking. Something wasn't adding up. The perfume was wrong too, now that I thought about it. Celine wore the same vanilla-scented stuff she'd been using since college. Tonight she'd smelled like something floral and expensive. I'm not proud of what I did next, but a man's gotta know where he stands. Celine had left her phone charging on the kitchen counter, like she always did. She'd never bothered to change her passcode from our anniversary date. The messages were all there, plain as day. Weeks of them, maybe months. Celine and Victor making plans, sharing inside jokes about the simple people in town, and discussing things that made my stomach turn. But it wasn't just the affair that got to me. It was how they talked about me. "Jack actually thinks I'm working late," one message read. "He's so clueless. It's almost sad." Victor's response: "Small-town guys like him never see it coming. Too busy playing with their tools." The laughing emoji that followed felt like a punch to the gut. I scrolled through more messages, each one worse than the last. They had nicknames for me. Grease Monkey was Victor's favorite. Celine preferred Mr. Fix-It, always with the eye-roll emoji. But the message that really caught my attention was from 3 days ago. "Storage Unit 47 tomorrow at 2. Can't wait to have you all to myself." I set the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went back to my workshop. My hands were shaking, but not from anger. Not yet. I was still in shock, still trying to process that my marriage of 8 years had become a joke to my wife and her fancy boss. Storage Unit 47. I knew the place, a facility out on Route 9 where people kept their boats and RVs during the winter. Celine had rented a unit there 6 months ago, claiming she needed space for her old college stuff and seasonal decorations. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? I grabbed a fresh beer and started planning. If Celine and Victor thought they were dealing with some clueless small-town mechanic, they were about to learn otherwise. I might work with my hands for a living, but that doesn't make me stupid. And I know this town better than any outsider CEO ever could. The next morning, Celine was already gone when I woke up. She'd left a note saying she had back-to-back meetings and wouldn't be home until late. How considerate of her to keep me informed of her schedule. I opened the shop as usual, but my heart wasn't in it. Old man Bannon stopped by around 10 with his ancient Ford pickup, complaining about a rattling noise in the engine. "You look like hell, Jack," he said, studying my face with those sharp ex-cop eyes of his. "Everything all right at home?" Bannon had been the police chief in this town for 30 years before he retired. He taught me everything I knew about reading people and situations. If anyone would understand what I was going through, it was him. "Just some personal stuff I'm working through," I said, popping the hood of his truck. "Personal stuff has a way of eating at a man if he doesn't handle it right." Bannon leaned against my workbench and crossed his arms. "You need to talk. I'm here." I appreciated the offer, but I wasn't ready to air my dirty laundry. Not yet. First, I needed to see this thing with my own eyes. At 1:30, I closed the shop early and drove out to the storage facility. I parked behind a cluster of pine trees where I could see Unit 47 without being spotted. Sure enough, at 5 minutes to 2, Celine's silver Honda pulled into the lot. She looked around nervously before getting out and walking to the unit. 10 minutes later, Victor's black BMW arrived. He didn't bother looking around. Why would he? In his mind, he was too smart to get caught by someone like me. I watched them disappear into the storage unit together and felt something cold settle in my chest. Seeing it happen was different from reading about it in text messages. This was real. This was my wife choosing another man over me and doing it in a place she'd rented with our money. I didn't stick around to see how long they stayed. I'd seen enough. That evening, Celine came home with another story about working late and grabbed a quick shower before dinner. She seemed more relaxed than she'd been in weeks, humming while she cooked pasta and actually asking about my day. "Just the usual," I said, watching her move around our kitchen like nothing had changed. Fixed Mrs. Patterson's transmission, tuned up the mayor's Buick, helped old man Bannon with his truck. "That's nice, honey." She wasn't really listening. She was already thinking about tomorrow, about her next meeting with Victor, about her next lie. But I was thinking too, about storage unit 47, about text messages and inside jokes, about how two people could share a bed and a life while one of them was planning an exit strategy. Celine thought she was so clever, so sophisticated compared to her simple husband who spent his days fixing other people's problems. She had no idea that I was about to start fixing one of my own. The next few days were the hardest of my life. I had to act normal, go through the motions of being a loving husband while my wife continued her charade. But I wasn't just sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I was gathering intelligence, and in a town this size, that meant talking to the right people. Rita Kowalski had been tending bar at the Harbor Master for 15 years. She knew every secret in town and wasn't shy about sharing them with people she trusted. Lucky for me, I'd been fixing her car for the better part of a decade, usually for the cost of parts because Rita was good people. I stopped by the bar Thursday afternoon, when the lunch crowd had cleared out, but the evening regulars hadn't arrived yet. Rita was wiping down glasses and watching the local news on the television mounted above the bar. "Jack Mahoney," she said, with a smile that faded when she got a good look at my face. "You look like someone stole your favorite wrench." "Just need a beer and some friendly conversation," I said, sliding onto a bar stool. Rita pulled a cold bottle from the cooler and set it in front of me. "This about Celine?" I nearly choked on my first sip. "What makes you say that?" "Honey, I've been watching people's faces for 15 years. You've got that look men get when they figure out what everyone else already knows." She leaned across the bar and lowered her voice. "How long have you known?" "Known what, exactly?" Rita glanced around the empty bar, then back at me. "About her and that fancy boy from her office, Victor something." So it was true. Other people had noticed. I wasn't losing my mind or jumping to conclusions. "How long has it been going on?" "Hard to say exactly, but I started seeing them together maybe 3 months ago." They'd come in separately, sit at opposite ends of the bar, then leave within 5 minutes of each other. Thought they were being clever. Rita shook her head. Amateur hour. You want to have an affair in a small town? You go to the next town over. 3 months. While I'd been working extra hours to save money for the vacation Celine had been talking about, she'd been meeting her boss for drinks and whatever came after. Who else knows? I asked. Most of the regulars have figured it out. Your sister Zoe mentioned it to me last week, said she'd seen Celine's car at that fancy waterfront restaurant where Victor likes to eat lunch. Rita refilled my beer without being asked. I'm sorry, Jack. I should have said something sooner. No, you did right. This isn't your problem to solve. But it was mine, and I was starting to get ideas about how to solve it. I called Zoe that evening while Celine was taking one of her increasingly frequent work calls in her home office. Finally, Zoe said when she picked up. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. My little sister had always been too smart for her own good. She worked as a paralegal at the biggest law firm in the county and had a talent for noticing details other people missed. What exactly did you see? I asked. Celine and Mr. Wonderful having lunch at Pier 42 2 weeks ago. They were holding hands across the table like teenagers. Made me want to throw up. Zoe paused. Jack, I wanted to tell you, but you knew I had to see it for myself. Something like that. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? I could confront Celine directly, demand an explanation, maybe try to work things out. But the text messages I'd read suggested this wasn't some temporary mistake or moment of weakness. This was a calculated betrayal, and they were both enjoying it. I'm still figuring that out, I told my sister. But when I do, I might need some help. You know I'm in. That woman never deserved you anyway. After I hung up, I sat in my workshop and thought about my options. I could hire a private investigator, but that would cost money we didn't have. And besides, I already knew what he'd find. I could file for divorce, but that would mean lawyers and court dates and dividing up everything we'd built together. Or I could handle this my own way. Friday morning brought new intelligence, courtesy of an unexpected source. Eric Peterson, the IT guy from Celine's company, showed up at my shop with a computer problem. My laptop's making weird noises, he said, setting an expensive-looking machine on my workbench. I know you work on cars, not computers, but I figured you might know someone who could help. I knew Eric by reputation. He was a quiet guy, maybe 25, who'd grown up in town before going away to college and coming back with a computer science degree. His family owned the hardware store on Main Street. I can take a look, I said, opening the laptop. Probably just a fan issue. Easy fix. While I worked, Eric wandered around my shop, examining the tools and equipment. This is a nice setup you've got here, very organized. 20 years of practice, I said. How do you like working for Victor's company? Eric's expression darkened. The job's fine. The boss is another story. How so? Let's just say Victor Felder isn't the business genius he pretends to be. Half the ideas he presents to investors are stolen from his employees. The other half are complete garbage. Eric picked up a wrench and examined it like he'd never seen one before. He treats people like they're disposable, especially people he thinks are beneath him. Sounds like a real charmer. The worst part is how he talks about the people in this town, like we're all just simple country folk who don't know any better. Eric set down the wrench and looked at me directly. I heard he's been spending a lot of time with your wife lately. There it was. Even the office IT guy knew what was going on. People talk, I said carefully. They sure do. And what they're saying isn't very nice. Eric paused. About either of them. I finished fixing his laptop and handed it back. No charge. Professional courtesy. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. Eric headed for the door, then turned back. You know, if you ever need any help with computer stuff, technical problems, that sort of thing, just let me know. I owe you one." The way he said it made me think he was offering more than just tech support. In a town where everyone knew everyone, having an ally inside Celine's company might come in handy. That afternoon, I decided to do some reconnaissance of my own. I drove to the office park where Celine worked, a modern glass and steel complex that looked out of place among the old fishing villages and working farms that made up most of our town. Victor's BMW was parked in a space marked "Reserved for CEO." Right next to it was Celine's Honda. At 2:30 on a Friday afternoon, when most people were winding down for the weekend, they were probably having another one of their meetings. I was about to leave when I spotted something interesting. A woman I recognized as Rena Walsh, one of Celine's work friends, was sitting in her car in the parking lot, talking on her phone and gesturing angrily. When she saw me, she ended the call and got out of her car. "Jack," she called, walking over with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What brings you to our little corporate paradise?" Rena had been to our house for dinner parties and barbecues. She was Celine's closest friend at work, a gossipy woman who thrived on office drama and social climbing. "Just dropping something off for Celine," I lied smoothly. "She forgot some papers at home." "Oh, she's in a meeting with Victor right now. Has been for the past hour." Rena's smile turned predatory. "They have a lot of meetings these days." "So I've noticed." "Well, you know how demanding he can be, especially with his favorite employees." She tilted her head and studied my face. "You don't look very surprised." "Should I be?" Rena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, Jack, you really are something special, aren't you?" As I drove home, I realized that Rena knew exactly what was going on between Celine and Victor. More than that, she seemed to be enjoying the drama of it all. In her mind, this was probably better than any soap opera. But I was starting to wonder if there was more to Rena's interest than just gossip. The way she'd been sitting in her car, the angry phone call, the way she'd looked when she talked about Victor's favorite employees, it all suggested someone who wasn't entirely happy with the current situation. Maybe I wasn't the only one who wanted to see Victor Felder taken down a peg. That evening, Celine announced that she'd be working late again the following Monday. Another important client meeting that required her personal attention. "Of course," I said, not looking up from the baseball game on television. "Wouldn't want to let the clients down." She kissed the top of my head before heading upstairs, probably to send Victor a text about their next rendezvous. But she'd made a mistake in telling me her plans so far in advance. It gave me time to make some plans of my own. Monday came with gray skies and the promise of rain, which seemed fitting for what I had planned. I spent the morning at the shop, working on routine maintenance jobs and thinking through every detail of my strategy. By lunchtime, I was ready to make my first move. I closed the shop early and drove to the storage facility. Unit 47 was in the back row, tucked between a boat trailer and someone's RV. The lock was a standard combination model, nothing fancy. I didn't plan to break in, but I wanted to get a feel for the layout. More importantly, I wanted to leave Victor a little message. His BMW was already there when I arrived, parked discreetly behind the office building where casual visitors wouldn't notice it. I had about an hour before Celine was supposed to arrive, plenty of time for what I had in mind. I'd brought a bar of soap from the shop, the industrial kind we used to mark parts and write temporary notes on windshields. It washed off easily, but left a clear message while it lasted. On Victor's rear windshield, I wrote in large block letters, "Enjoy your meeting, boss man." On the driver's side window, "Small town guys aren't as stupid as you think." It wasn't much, but it would let him know that someone was watching. Someone who knew exactly what kind of meeting he was having. I was back at my shop by 3 o'clock, working on a brake job when my phone rang. It was Celine, and she sounded shaken. "Jack, the strangest thing happened today. Someone vandalized Victor's car while we were in a meeting." "That's terrible," I said, doing my best to sound concerned. "What kind of vandalism?" Just some soap on the windows, but the messages were really specific. Like someone knew we were there. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Victor thinks it might be someone from the office. Maybe a disgruntled employee. Could be. You said he's not the most popular boss. He's talking about installing security cameras, maybe hiring a private investigator. Celine paused. I'm probably going to be working even later for the next few weeks while we sort this out. Whatever you need to do, honey. I understand. After I hung up, I couldn't help smiling. Victor was rattled, which meant my message had been received. But more than that, Celine's immediate assumption that it was an inside job told me she was worried about office gossip. Good. She should be worried. That evening, I got an unexpected visitor. Zoe showed up at my door with a bottle of beer and a mischievous grin. So, she said, settling into my kitchen chair, I heard Victor Felder had some car trouble today. News travels fast in this town, especially when Rita Kowalski's nephew works security at that storage place. Zoe took a sip of her beer and looked at me expectantly. Want to tell me what you're really up to? I'd never been able to keep secrets from my sister. She had a way of seeing through people that reminded me of our mother. I'm sending a message, I said finally. What kind of message? The kind that lets them know their little game isn't as private as they think. Zoe nodded approvingly. Good. That woman has been walking all over you for years. About time you stood up for yourself. It's not just about standing up for myself, it's about consequences. I leaned back in my chair and looked at my sister. People like Victor think they can take whatever they want because guys like me won't fight back. They think we're too simple, too trusting, too stupid to see what's happening right in front of us. And now you're proving them wrong. I'm just getting started. Zoe's grin widened. What do you need me to do? Over the next few days, I put the second part of my plan into motion. It started with a conversation with Eric Peterson. He showed up at my shop Wednesday morning with coffee and donuts from the bakery on Main Street. Thought you might be hungry, he said, setting the bag on my workbench. Also thought you might be interested in some information about your wife's boss. What kind of information? The kind that might help you understand what you're really dealing with. Eric pulled a folder from his backpack and set it on the workbench. Victor's been skimming money from client accounts. Not enough to trigger automatic alerts, but enough to add up over time. I opened the folder and found printouts of financial records, email exchanges, and what looked like internal company memos. How did you get this? I maintain the company's computer systems. I see everything that goes through our servers. Eric's expression was grim. Victor's been using company resources for personal expenses, inflating his travel reimbursements, even billing clients for services we never provided. Why are you showing me this? Because Victor Felder is a thief and a bully, and he's using his position to take advantage of people, including your wife. Eric paused. I don't know if she's involved in the financial stuff, but she's definitely involved with him. I studied the documents more carefully. If this information was accurate, Victor wasn't just an arrogant boss having an affair with a married employee. He was a criminal who'd been stealing from his own company. What do you want me to do with this? Whatever you think is right. But Jack, if you're planning some kind of revenge, you should know that Victor's not just going to roll over and take it. He's got connections, money, lawyers. He'll fight dirty if he has to. So will I. Eric smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. Good, because this town deserves better than people like him. After Eric left, I spent the rest of the day studying the documents he'd given me. The evidence was solid, detailed, and damning. Victor had been stealing from his company for at least 6 months, maybe longer. The amounts weren't huge by corporate standards, but they were enough to constitute serious fraud. More importantly, they gave me leverage. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting Victor directly or turning the evidence over to the police, I decided to use it as ammunition for a more personal kind of justice. I scanned Eric's documents and saved them to a secure email account I'd set up specifically for this purpose. Then I crafted a simple message and sent it to Victor's personal email address. Mr. Felder, I think we need to talk. I have some information about your business practices that you might find interesting. I also have some concerns about your relationship with my wife. Perhaps we can work out an arrangement that benefits everyone. Jack Mahoney. I attached one page from Eric's evidence file, just enough to prove I wasn't bluffing. Then I sat back and waited for Victor to make his next move. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang at 8:30 that evening. This is Victor Felder. I got your message. I figured you would. What do you want? Right now, I want you to understand that you're not dealing with some ignorant small-town mechanic who's going to quietly disappear while you destroy his marriage. I kept my voice calm and professional. I know what you've been doing with my wife, and I know what you've been doing with your company's money. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You're making a serious mistake, Victor said finally. You have no idea who you're messing with. Actually, I think I do. You're a thief and a liar who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. But here's the thing, Victor. I grew up in this town. I know how things work here, and I know how to make your life very complicated. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. See, in small towns like this one, reputation matters. People talk, word gets around, and once you're labeled as untrustworthy, it's hard to recover. I paused to let that sink in. I'm guessing your investors and clients wouldn't be too happy to learn about your creative accounting methods. What do you want? I want you to end whatever's going on between you and Celine. I want you to transfer her to a different department or find her a job at another company, and I want you to stay away from my family. And if I don't, then I send my evidence to the FBI, the State Attorney General, and every business reporter in New England. Your choice. Victor hung up without another word, but I knew the message had been delivered. Now I had to wait and see how he'd respond. I didn't have to wait long for that answer either. The next morning brought the first sign that Victor wasn't going to go quietly. Celine came downstairs looking worried, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. Victor got a threatening message last night, she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. Someone's trying to blackmail him with false accusations about the company finances. That's serious stuff, I said, not looking up from my newspaper. Did he call the police? He's thinking about it. He thinks it might be connected to the car incident. She sat down across from me and leaned forward. Jack, I'm scared. What if this person comes after me too? I set down the paper and looked at my wife, really looked at her. She was genuinely frightened, but not for the reasons she was telling me. She was scared because her perfect little affair was falling apart, and she didn't know how to control the situation. I'm sure Victor will handle it, I said. He seems like a smart guy. He is smart. That's what makes this so scary. Someone's been watching us, following us, learning our routines. Celine's voice dropped to a whisper. What if it's someone dangerous? Maybe you should be more careful about where you go and who you meet with. She looked at me sharply, and for a moment I thought she might have figured it out. But then her phone buzzed with a text message, and her attention shifted. Victor wants to see me right away, she said, already heading for the door. I might be late again tonight. Take care of yourself, I called after her. After she left, I drove to the shop and tried to focus on work, but my mind kept wandering to what Victor's next move might be. I didn't have to wonder for long. Around noon, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled into my parking lot. Two men in expensive suits got out and walked into my shop like they owned the place. Jack Mahoney? The taller one asked. That's me. What can I do for you? We're private investigators working for Victor Felder. He's asked us to look into some harassment he's been experiencing. The man pulled out a business card and handed it to me. We understand you might have some information that could help our investigation. I glanced at the card. The company was based in Boston, which meant Victor was spending serious money on this problem. I'm not sure how I can help you, I said. I barely know Mr. Felder. But you know his employee Celine Mahoney quite well, the second investigator said with a thin smile. She's your wife, isn't she? Last time I checked. Mr. Felder is concerned that someone might be using Mrs. Mahoney to get information about his business operations. Corporate espionage is a serious crime. I had to admire Victor's strategy. He was trying to flip the script, make me look like the criminal while positioning himself as the victim. It was clever, but it wouldn't work. If Victor's worried about corporate espionage, maybe he should be more careful about who has access to his financial records, I said casually. The two investigators exchanged glances. Are you admitting that you've had access to confidential company information? The tall one asked. I'm not admitting anything. I'm just saying that if someone wanted to investigate Victor's business practices, they probably wouldn't have to look very hard to find interesting information. Is that a threat, Mr. Mahoney? It's an observation. The investigators stayed for another 10 minutes, asking questions and trying to intimidate me with legal jargon and vague threats. But I'd been expecting something like this. Victor was a corporate guy who thought every problem could be solved with money and lawyers. After they left, I called Zoe. We need to meet, I said. Tonight, after Celine leaves for her late meeting. What happened? Victor's fighting back. I'll explain everything when I see you. That evening, Zoe showed up at my house with Rita Kowalski in tow. I brought reinforcements, Zoe said. Rita knows things. I know lots of things, Rita confirmed, settling into my kitchen chair with a beer. For instance, I know that Victor's been asking questions around town about you, trying to dig up dirt. What kind of questions? The usual stuff. Financial problems, drinking, gambling, other women. He's looking for something he can use against you. Rita took a sip of her beer and shook her head. Amateur hour again. He doesn't understand how small towns work. What do you mean? He sent those fancy investigators to the harbor master this afternoon, flashing money around and asking people to talk about you. Know what happened? I shook my head. Every single person they talked to told them to get lost. Old man Bannon actually threw one of them out of the bar. Rita grinned. You've been fixing people's cars in this town for 20 years, Jack. You've helped people when they couldn't afford to pay, given rides to folks whose cars broke down, donated time and parts to the high school auto shop program. Victor Felder's been here less than 2 years and thinks he can buy information about you. So his investigation didn't turn up anything useful? Worse than that. Now everyone in town knows that some outsider is trying to cause problems for you. People are talking and they're not happy about it. Zoe leaned forward. What's your next move? I'd been thinking about that all afternoon. Victor had escalated by bringing in investigators and trying to intimidate me. It was time to escalate back. I'm going to give him something real to worry about, I said. The next morning, I put my plan into action. First, I made copies of all the financial evidence Eric had given me and mailed them to 3 different addresses: the FBI's white-collar crime division, the state attorney general's office, and the business editor at the largest newspaper in the state. I didn't include my name or any identifying information, just a brief note explaining that the documents contained evidence of financial fraud at Victor's company. Then I drove to the storage facility. Unit 47 was empty when I arrived, but I wasn't there to spy on Celine and Victor. I was there to send a message. Using a permanent marker, I wrote on the metal door of the storage unit, "Smile, you're on camera." Below that, I added, "Small town justice is coming." It wasn't true about the camera, but Victor didn't know that, and the message about small town justice was definitely true. My phone rang as I was driving back to the shop. It was Eric. "Jack, we need to talk." Something big is happening at the office. What kind of something? FBI agents showed up an hour ago with a warrant to search Victor's office and computer files. They're also asking to interview employees about financial irregularities. Eric's voice was excited. Victor's freaking out. He's locked himself in the conference room with his lawyer. What about Celine? She's in her office, but she looks like she's about to be sick. I think she knows this is connected to her affair somehow. Keep me posted on what happens. Will do. And Jack, nice work. I spent the rest of the day at my shop, working on routine repairs and waiting for developments. Around 4 o'clock, Celine called. Jack, something terrible is happening at work. The FBI is here. They're investigating Victor for fraud, and everyone's talking about affairs and corruption. She was crying, which was something I hadn't heard in years. I don't know what to do. Come home, I said. We'll figure it out together. But when Celine got home an hour later, she wasn't looking for comfort or support. She was looking for answers. This is all too convenient, she said, pacing around our living room like a caged animal. First, someone vandalizes Victor's car, then he gets blackmail messages, and now the FBI shows up with evidence of financial fraud. Someone's orchestrating this. Maybe Victor just got sloppy and someone noticed. No, this is personal. Someone's targeting him specifically. She stopped pacing and looked at me directly. Someone who knows about our relationship. Your relationship? Don't play dumb, Jack. I know you know about Victor and me. The question is, what are you planning to do about it? So, there it was. No more lies. No more pretending. Celine had finally admitted the truth, and she was challenging me to respond. What I'm planning to do, I said calmly, is whatever it takes to protect myself and my reputation in this town. If that means exposing a corrupt businessman who's been stealing from his company and sleeping with married women, so be it. Celine's face went pale. You sent that evidence to the FBI. I sent evidence of financial fraud to the appropriate authorities. What they do with it is up to them. You're trying to destroy him. I'm trying to stop him from destroying me. We stared at each other across our living room, and I realized this was the first honest conversation we'd had in months, maybe years. What happens now? Celine asked quietly. Now we see how Victor handles being investigated by the FBI. My guess is he's going to have bigger problems than worrying about his affair with my wife. Celine left the house that night and didn't come back. I found out later that she'd gone to stay with Rena Walsh, probably to plan their next move. But I wasn't worried about their plans anymore. The game had changed, and I was no longer playing defense. The FBI investigation moved faster than I'd expected. Within a week, Victor's company was shut down pending a full audit of their financial records. Local news crews showed up to film the empty office building, and reporters started asking questions about the CEO who disappeared overnight. Because that's exactly what Victor had done. According to Rita's network of gossips and information sources, he'd cleaned out his bank accounts, packed his BMW, and left town without telling anyone where he was going. Guilty people run, Old Man Bannon observed when I stopped by the harbor master for a beer. Innocent people stick around and fight the charges. What about Celine? I asked. Still staying with that Rena woman, from what I hear. Word is she's looking for a lawyer. Divorce lawyer? Criminal lawyer. FBI's been asking questions about who else might have known about Victor's financial games. Your wife's name keeps coming up. That was a complication I hadn't anticipated. I'd wanted to expose Victor's fraud and end his affair with my wife, but I hadn't meant to get Celine in legal trouble. Despite everything she'd done, I didn't want to see her go to prison. I was mulling this over when Eric Peterson walked into the bar and spotted me. Jack, I've been looking for you. He slid into the booth across from me and lowered his voice. I've got news about Victor. He's still missing? Not anymore. FBI tracked him down in Florida trying to board a plane to the Cayman Islands. They arrested him at the airport with a suitcase full of cash and fake identification documents. Sounds like he was planning to disappear permanently. Gets better. When they searched his condo, they found evidence that he'd been planning to frame other employees for his fraud, including your wife. I set down my beer and stared at Eric. What kind of evidence? Forged documents, fake email accounts, planted financial records. Victor was going to claim that Celine and a few other employees were the real criminals, and he was just an innocent CEO who'd been deceived by his staff. The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. Victor hadn't just been stealing money and sleeping with my wife. He'd been planning to destroy her life to cover his own crimes. Does Celine know about this? FBI told her yesterday. She's been cleared of any wrongdoing, but she's pretty shaken up. Turns out her boyfriend was planning to send her to prison. I finished my beer and stood up. I need to go home. Jack, Eric called after me. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Victor would have destroyed a lot of lives if you hadn't stopped him. I drove home through the quiet streets of my town, thinking about justice and revenge and the difference between the two. I'd set out to punish Victor for his affair with my wife, but I'd ended up exposing a criminal who was planning to ruin innocent people to save himself. Celine's car was in our driveway when I arrived. I found her sitting at our kitchen table, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd seen her in years. "Hello, Jack," she said quietly. "Celine, I suppose you heard about Victor's arrest." "Some of it." She nodded and looked down at her hands. FBI showed me the evidence they found in his condo. He was going to blame me for everything, make it look like I was the one stealing money and covering it up. "I'm sorry." "Are you? Because this is what you wanted, isn't it? Victor destroyed, me humiliated, your revenge complete." I sat down across from her and really looked at my wife for the first time in months. She looked exhausted, defeated, and genuinely remorseful. "I wanted Victor to face consequences for what he'd done," I said. "To both of us. I wanted him to understand that he couldn't just take whatever he wanted without paying a price." "And me? What consequences do I face?" That was the question I'd been avoiding. What did I want to happen to Celine? She'd betrayed our marriage, lied to my face, and participated in humiliating me behind my back. But she'd also been manipulated by a criminal who was planning to destroy her life. "I don't know," I admitted. "What do you want to happen?" "I want to apologize. For the affair, for the lies, for everything." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." "Why did you do it?" "Because he made me feel important, special. Like I was more than just a small-town mechanic's wife." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know how that sounds. I know it's not an excuse." "No, it's not. I lost my job when the company shut down. I lost Victor when he turned out to be a criminal. And I lost you because I was too stupid and selfish to appreciate what I had." We sat in silence for several minutes, two people who'd shared 8 years of marriage trying to figure out if there was anything left to salvage. "What happens now?" Celine asked finally. "I don't know that either, but I know I can't pretend this never happened." "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking if there's any chance you might be able to forgive me someday." I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and tried to find some trace of the woman I'd married. She was still there, underneath the guilt and shame and regret. But so much had changed between us that I wasn't sure we could ever go back. "Maybe," I said, "but it would take time. A lot of time. I have time. And it would take work. Real work, not just words. I understand." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the town where I'd spent my entire life. My neighbors, my friends, my customers, they all knew what had happened. Some of them would judge Celine harshly, others would judge me for considering forgiveness. But ultimately, what mattered was what we could live with. "Victor's in jail," I said without turning around. "His company's gone, his reputation's destroyed, and he'll probably spend the next 10 years in federal prison. That's justice. And us? I turned back to face her. Us is something we'll have to figure out day by day. 3 months later, I was working late in my shop when Zoe stopped by with coffee and news. Victor pled guilty, she said, handing me a steaming cup. 25 years for fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. That's a long time. He'll be an old man when he gets out. If he gets out. Zoe settled into the chair I kept for customers and studied my face. How do you feel about it? Satisfied, I guess. He got what he deserved. And Celine? She's trying. We're trying. I took a sip of coffee and considered how much to tell my sister. It's not easy, but we're working on it. Think you can make it work? I don't know. But I think we owe it to ourselves to try. Zoe nodded approvingly. Good. Because despite everything she did, I think she really loves you. Yeah, well, love isn't always enough. No, but it's a start. After Zoe left, I locked up the shop and drove home through the quiet streets of my town. Celine was waiting for me with dinner and a tentative smile. We ate together and talked about small things, the weather, the local news, plans for the weekend. It wasn't the marriage we'd had before, and it might never be. But it was honest in a way that our relationship hadn't been for months. And for now, that was enough. Victor Felder had thought he could take whatever he wanted from people like us. He'd learned otherwise. Sometimes small-town justice moves slowly, but it always arrives in the end. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it brings the possibility of redemption along with it.